here we go to the top of the hour. Ben in Brooklyn. Go ahead, Ben.
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Good. What's happening?
Have you known Mike McCagnon before he was the GM of the Jets?
No.
He comes on your show even though he's ESPN and, he came to the Tiller Center. I was just wondering about that.
I did not know him. He was a fan of the program. He's from New Jersey. I did not know him. I knew where he worked. I knew what his background was. He'd been in the league a while, but I did not know him personally until he came to the Jets. No, I had never met him before.
Oh, okay. Well, I actually think he's the Jets are in good hands with him.
Yeah, I think he's very solid. I think he's a guy who doesn't look for a lot. And thanks for the call. I don't think he looks for a lot of attention. I think he's one of those GMs that doesn't want a lot of attention. He just wants to build a team. I think he's a very sound, nuts and bolts kind of general manager. Actually reminds me a little bit of a George Young type of general manager. That's who he reminds me of a little bit. Now, not as cantankerous as George was, but that's because George was older. But he reminds me of George Young a little bit. Really does. In his thought process, he reminds me of George Young a little bit. Audie in Brooklyn. What's up, Audie?
Hey, how's it going, Mike? Thank you for the 30 years. Listen,
Thank you.
I think today is a big day for Bowles. I think if he loses in Denver, I think he's out. And the comment I want to make as far as the quarterback situation,
wait, who's out? Todd Bowles?
Bowles is out if he loses.
Oh, you're out of your mind.
Okay,
You're out of your mind.
one.
He's not getting fired. He's going to be back next year. He's absolutely back.
If he loses Denver, mark my word. And,
you mark your words. I spent time with the general manager last week. I'm telling you, he's going to be back next year.
All right. And then as far as the quarterback situation, last year you made your comments on Watson. I knew you loved him. The Heisman in college, you said he wasn't going to be like an NFL-type guy. This year it's going to be a similar type of thing where Mayfield wins the Heisman.
What quarterback are we talking about now?
I'm talking about Watson last year compared to Mayfield this year. I think he goes third or fourth in the draft. You didn't like Watson as an NFL guy. Do you think that team?
I loved Watson. I loved Watson as a college player.
I know.
What I said about Watson was, I thought he would get hurt if he tried to play the way he played in the NFL because he's got to use his legs.
Right.
Because he's not a pocket quarterback. He has got to.
Wilson. Neither a lot of guys.
I understand that, and Watson. And thanks for the call, Audie. But Watson lasted all of 5 games before he got hurt. And that was my problem with him. He is not your typical pocket quarterback. And if guys have got to use their legs to play, if they've got to, and Wilson is doing a lot of that now too, it's very hard to stay healthy doing that. Wilson is not your typical, prototypical guy. Wilson is a little bit more of a guy who has learned how to refine his game to the pros. But it's risky to play and do some of the things he's doing. Watson had to use his legs. They had him on the move. They had him doing a lot of different things, throwing on the move, and he was making big plays. But you saw what happened. He didn't leave in the last half of the season. It's difficult when you try to play that way. RG3 came in and lit the league up for about 6 weeks. 8 weeks, and then he was gone. Now he's not even in the league anymore. It's dangerous for those quarterbacks. Very hard to keep them healthy if they have to use their legs to be successful. DJ in Piscataway, what's up, DJ?
Hey, good morning, Mike. I'll try to make it quick. I want to talk about the Steelers, ask you one thing on their prospects. But thank you for your 30 years. It's been very special, showing my age real quickly. I was calling when you were Mike and the Mad Dog, when folks like Miriam, Short Al, and Incarcerated Bob would call.
That's a long
and
time
I
ago.
really appreciate you and bless you and your family. And regarding the Steelers, what are the 1 or 2 things? I think they need to get the home game if you're not looking past anybody else, but if everything has to come through Pittsburgh, the health, what is the 1 or 2 things you think that they need to do to get by the Patriots if they get that far?
Pass rush. There's only one way to beat Tom Brady. Pass rush. That's it. If you can't cover your way to beat Tom Brady. There's been a couple of times people have outscored them. That's really been a guy like Peyton Manning. It's hard to do. I think the Steelers could 1 time out of 10, 2 times out of 10 could outscore them in a game. But I think to beat them, where you're going to actually frustrate them, it's all about the pass rush. You can't cover against them. They will, because no matter whether you play them, whichever way you play them, man or zone, they have an answer. They have an answer for either one. So they know exactly how to morph into an offense that will work against either one. He has completely had a history of tearing up the Steelers. And frankly, I don't think the Steelers will change that. I think that even if they beat them once, they'll never beat them twice. I just think the Pats are going to get the best of the Steelers. I just think they just have to own them. Some teams own certain teams, and thanks for the call. The Pats own the Steelers. They own the Steelers. I mean, they just do. They absolutely own them. Chris in Wallingford, what's up, Chris?
Hey, Mike. First off, thank you for the 30 years, especially on the Sunday show. We really appreciate it. I got a couple of buddies, Tom and Zinni, they're 20 feet away. They're having a blast, so thank you.
I don't know what your phone's doing, Chris, but I can hardly hear you. Go ahead. One more time.
Can you hear me now? I got a question on the Giants.
Why do I not hear him on my headset? Why do I hear him out there and not on my headset? I'm hardly hearing him, Steve, so I don't know. Go ahead. One more time.
I got a question on the Giants, the game today. Can you hear me?
Steve, I'm not hearing him in my headset at all. I'm just picking him up off the speaker. That's it. I'm not hearing him in my headset at all. Go ahead. Try again, Chris.
Hey, Mike. Question on the Giants.
There you go. Now I have it. Now I have it.
All right.
Now Go ahead.
All right. So you mentioned before I'm actually kind of looking forward to the game today. There's a little juice, a chance to knock the Cowboys, completely out end their season. My question is, I'm a big Eli supporter. I think he can play quarterback on a winning team. They have so many injuries, though. What in today's game and going forward for the end of the year, what can we possibly evaluate if he can be the guy next year? Is there anything that we can take away from these last couple of games to learn?
I don't think Eli has to prove himself. I mean, I don't think it's about that. I think that if you're going to have to build a certain type of team for him, you've got to put more attention to the offensive line. If you wanted to, that's what should have been done this year. If you're going to play with him as your quarterback, you have got to protect him. You have got to give him a chance to throw the ball and go back to playing the way he plays, which should work with Beckham anyway, and that is let him throw the ball down the field, which is what his strength has always been, and that's how he won. Their ability to throw the ball down the field, which they've gotten away from. Now, right now, it's a matter of they can't protect enough. And thanks for the call. They can't protect enough to get the ball down the field. That's the biggest problem. But, you want the game to be easier. The game's a lot easier. And that's why when people evaluate Eli, he has no protection. He's got no play-action game off the run. The easiest throws any quarterback ever gets in the NFL are on play-action. When the running game's working, the running backs, and the linebackers, and the defense has to play against the run. They have got to stop the run. When they do that, it gives you so much room to throw the ball that it's just a very easy game. 2nd and 2 and 3rd and 1 are easy plays in the NFL. Eli doesn't have a lot of those. He really doesn't. And the fact is, their running game has been so poor. And that they have got to get the offensive line back and the running game back to a certain level. And then they have to decide how they want to play their offense with the passing game because, I don't know what they'll do with the other receiver spot. As far as the 3rd receiver spot, they got Shepard, obviously, to go with Beckham. And I don't think Beckham's going anywhere because right now to deal Beckham or to make a decision on Beckham and send him packing off this bad year, off a year when he misses the season, would be a big mistake. You want to get rid of him on a high. You don't want to get rid of him on a year like this. So I would keep him and try to have a big year with him next year. And the question will be what they do with their quarterback. It really will. If they go draft a quarterback in the first 3 or 4 picks, I think they'll want him to play next year. So I think Eli's time will be done here. If they don't, maybe Eli's back. I think it really comes down to that. Ryan and Ramsey, what's up, Ryan?
Joe, good to have you back on Sunday. It's been a while.
Thank you.
I went to my first Army-Navy game yesterday in the snow, and Mike, I got to put that event on the top of my list. I've been to World Series. I've been to Michigan, Ohio State. I usually call you about Clemson, and I've seen some great events. What these kids did yesterday and what they're going to do later in life, I couldn't paint a better picture of what the team was like. And I know you've been to plenty, but it was unbelievable.
Did you watch the Army march into the stadium?
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's worth the price of admission by itself. To watch them come in with the precision they come into the stadium, it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
I mean, it really
and I'm
is.
with someone who used to march into the stadium, went to Navy, and it was really special. My one question is, I've asked you this years ago, would you ever reconsider doing the book deal?
Doing what? As I said, thanks for the call, Ryan. I came close this year. I met with a couple of book companies about doing a book that was going to be simultaneous to me doing this last season. And we came close, but I just decided not to, for the reason that there was a lot. They put a lot of pressure on how many appearances they needed to promote the book. And having this fall right now that I've had and the things we've done and had to do, it would have been very tough to pile another 50 appearances on that this year or whatever it would have been. So I think I made the right decision. The book was not the issue. It was how we were going to promote the book that was the issue, because they expect, and I understand, they expect a lot of promotion, and they just weren't going to allow the show to be the promotion, even though that would be the most of the driving force. They still want you to make all these other appearances, and I just didn't have the time to do that, and that's the reason I turned it down. It was a very good offer. The people were great. They were very accommodating. I thought, a great idea. We had come up with a bunch of ideas. We had a lot of the book already done from a standpoint of the thought process, but it was really about how we were going to promote the book than anything else, and that's why we didn't do it. But maybe one day, I don't know. I would never say never. I think it's unlikely because it does take a lot of time. It really takes an incredible amount of time to do. I think I'd be more interested in creating content somewhere else, and we'll see how that unfolds in the days and weeks to come as far as that. Steve in Hillsborough, what's up, Steve?
We missed you, especially going down to Bar A. I'm a big Yankee fan, so seeing Hall is real exciting, but I had a point about the Giants. Do you think they're going to actually show up and play today and prove that they're all right and look forward to the future, if they're just going to come out flat in the bag?
I tell you, that would be a terrible. I would expect the Giants, and they are beat up, but I would expect the Giants to come out with a lot of enthusiasm today. If they didn't, I think that would be a ringing indictment on Spags. I even think it would be a bit of an indictment on Eli. I really think the team comes out today with a lot of emotion. Now, listen, I'm not saying they have, they aren't banged up in a lot of spots, and they aren't missing people and aren't weak in spots. They clearly are. That's how they got to be 2-10. But I would expect a really, really spirited effort from them today, and I'll be fascinated by the composition of the crowd as to how many Giant fans and how many Cowboy fans are in the building. First of all, we know how well the Cowboy fans travel. They travel amazingly well. Secondly, I had call after call after call. Chris knows, he's sitting right here, where they said they were selling their tickets. I mean, we must have taken 50 calls from guys that week who were frustrated about selling their tickets for the Cowboy game. And I know there's always a market for doing that, so I would expect there to be a really big number of Cowboy fans in the building today. I'll be fascinated to see what that turns out to be. 11 o'clock straight up. We have a couple minutes left on the other side to do that. Then we're going to set up and get you ready for photos. What we're going to do, folks, I'll tell you as soon as we come back how we're going to set this up with the promotions people. For those of you that want to take some photos or get something signed, we're going to do that. Set up in a couple of minutes for that. We'll come back and tell you right after the update with the McMahon.
Be listening every Monday.